question was posited to me, and the question is, why don't we, as Christians, celebrate Passover? Uh, it's an interesting question because people seem to think that there is this massive separation that exists between Jews and Christians. You immediately have discussions about Old Testament versus New Testament. I've actually heard Christians utter words like, "Well, I don't really pay any attention to the Old Testament because we're New Testament. We're about Jesus." Well, let me say, the moment that you say that, it's virtually, well, it is. It's an ignorant statement. I have no other way to say that. Good morning, Tammy. I have no other way of saying that, because you cannot understand the ministry of Christ. You can't understand the life of Jesus. You can't understand the disciples. You can't understand the thoughts unless you understand the context of the Hebrew Scriptures. That's why there's so much misunderstanding of the New Testament, and is because we don't understand where we came from, what it's all about. It's negated, and people have blamed the Jews for so many things, including there's still a myth out there that the Jews were the ones who crucified Jesus. They were not. There were religious leaders that didn't like Jesus because of his message, but the Romans, he was crucified via Roman crucifixion. So let's get that out of the way right away. Huge myth, awful myth, stupid myth, dumb, and any Christian that repeats that is also ignorant. I'm pretty blunt when it comes to this stuff because I can't even believe that there are people that are out there that still say that. Okay, so let's talk about Passover. In order to understand Passover today, you've got to understand Passover in the context of when it first took place. After when God told Moses, "You're going to be the guy that's going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt," there was a whole discussion about how Pharaoh wasn't going to believe it, and what do we do? And remember, if you remember the story, there was plague after plague after plague for God to keep telling Pharaoh, "You got to let my people go," through Moses. Let my people go. And Pharaoh's heart would be hardened, and then finally, God told Moses, "Look, I'm going to go through. The angel of death is going to come through, and we're going to wipe out every certain child below a certain age." And so this is how this is going to work. But he said to him, "If you go and you get the blood," and he laid out the guidelines. If you will take the blood from the animal sacrifice and you will put it over the doorpost, which was the entrance to your home. If you will put it over that, and you will put it over the doorpost of your home, when the angel of death comes through, he will pass over you. In other words, so don't, and told them exactly what they need to eat and what it was going to be like. And if you remember the story, after the death of all of these children, but the Israelites were saved who put the blood on the doorpost, God, the angel of death passed over them. They were released, and that was the final thing that God used ultimately to deliver them, where Pharaoh finally says, "That's it. I'm letting these people go. This is too much to bear." And so Passover was the thing that ultimately resulted in the freedom from slavery of the people of Israel. Right? So that's number one. So that's what we have to look at. All right, so that's the context. Now, I'm not going to read all of these things and go over this like it's a sermon this morning, but I'm still going to tell you the story of Passover, and then I want you to go back and read how all of this took place with Jesus and what that. I don't know why I'm freezing up. That's not sure why. I'm having that clear on my end. Am I freezing up to anybody else? Because there's no issue here. There doesn't seem to be an issue. So I don't even have anybody else on my internet this morning. Okay. So all right, let me keep going, and I'll answer some of these questions, and then we'll come back. And if there's something that you missed, let me know. All right. So that's the context of how Passover first started. And then it became a festival or a feast of Israel that Israel was supposed to celebrate. Same thing with Yom Kippur, which was the Day of Atonement. So stop with that. And so the Israelites were supposed to celebrate Passover. every year, God's deliverance of them. Yom Kippur is closely related to that. And so Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. So just so you know these two things, the Day of Atonement is when Israel's sins were, the high priest offered a sacrifice, Israel's sins were atoned for or covered over for the next year. So there were certain things they did for atonement, and there was fasting and all of the things that went with it. There was also, by the way, on Yom Kippur, let me go a little bit further with this. Yom Kippur, there was something called the scapegoat, which is where we get that term from, where the priest would figuratively lay his hands on a goat, transferring Israel's sins to the goat, and the goat was led out in the wilderness, signifying the taking away of the sin on a scapegoat, on something that didn't deserve it, but took it anyway. So you need to keep these pictures in mind, okay? They're very, very important when you're talking about these feasts in Israel. All right. Now, obviously, Passover and the Feast of Israel changed over time. The only thing we have is the oral history of how these things were celebrated. And obviously, just like certain celebrations that we have, they morph, they change, things are added. Between the book of Malachi, the final prophet in the Hebrew Scriptures, and the book of Matthew, the first book in the New Testament, there was a very important work that was completed called the Talmud. The Mishnah, I forgot, there's like three different divisions of them. But there were rabbis that were basically created these commentaries on the law. And there was some differentiation. So there were certain rabbis said certain things. And that's where you get the term Talmudic Judaism. The Talmud is what many of the Jews, along with the Torah, they believe, of the 5 books of Moses, were the key. But the Talmud was what they often referred to for some interpretation of this. So that's where we get the term Talmudic Judaism from. So the Talmud was completed during that, what we call the intertestamental period, that time in between, that 400 silent years in which a prophet from God had not spoken. So fast forward now to the time of Christ. Now, let me say this, because I saw there was something earlier about, but do Jews read or believe the New Testament? There are some that do, yes, and they may read the New Testament, but there are Jews that don't read the New Testament, just like there are Christians that don't read the Old Testament for the same reason. I think that if a lot of Christians read let me just answer this now. I think if a lot of Christians read the Old Testament, understood it, there wouldn't be as much ignorance in Christianity, much anti-Semitism, and all the other things that go with it. And so I also think that if there were some of our Jewish friends, as I'm going to point in a minute, read the New Testament, they would actually see that there's not this disconnect, but there's actually a connection and a continuation and a fulfillment of what God said. And let me back up to that. All right. So, and then we'll come back, and if you need that clarified, I'll try to answer that again at the end when we're done talking about this. So fast forward, during that time, the time of Jesus, when Jesus came along, Jesus was a Jew. Jesus celebrated the feast. Jesus went to temple. Jesus taught in the temple. Jesus read from the Torah. I think that we miss this. Jesus was raised as a Jew. His name in Hebrew is Yeshua, which is the one who delivers. Also, as we would say in English, Joshua. Joshua in English, Yeshua in Hebrew. And we believe that he was Yeshua HaMashiach, which is Jesus the Messiah. Some obviously don't believe that. But he was Yeshua, the one who delivers. Joshua was the one who led the children of Israel ultimately into the promised land. So Jesus comes along and he's being raised as a Jew. There's no problem. But he comes along and he starts to talk about the connection of Judaism to who he is. So that was the the connection there. So understand that you're coming at this from the perspective that Jesus is Jewish. He's being raised in all these things, but then he starts to make the connection of who he is. So what he's doing is he's connecting their search for the Messiah to him, which of course they were at that time looking for for Mashiach. I'm trying to think which one it is. That was Mashiach ben David or Mashiach ben. He was Mashiach ben Yosef. They were looking for the Messiah, son of David, but they were looking at the Messiah as the one who would restore national identity, make their nation great again, because they were constantly under the thumb of so many people throughout their lives. Constantly, other nations having. There was the Egyptians. Now it was the Romans. And so they're looking for this victorious political figure, this general who's going to come in and make their nation great again. They want their kingdom restored. They don't want to be under the thumb. They know that there was a Messiah that was promised that was going to restore the kingdom. And even the Jewish disciples were concerned about that, even after Jesus had risen from the dead. All right. So understand the context that he is celebrating these particular festivals throughout with them. All right. Now let's fast forward to what we call Passion Week in Christianity. Palm Sunday is what we just celebrated. If you read the story in the Gospels, and John chapter, starting in John chapter 13, actually gives you this from John 13 to about John 17. It's an incredible summary of what happened those last few days, and especially when Jesus decides he wants to eat the last Passover meal with the disciples. It's Passover. And so what he does is he tells them exactly what they need to do. They make preparations. They're going to be in this upper room of somebody's house. We don't know whose house it was. It's irrelevant. It's unimportant. But the point is that it was just going to be the 13 of them, the 12 disciples and Jesus, and they were all going to eat together. Well, as you know the story, if you know the story of the Passover and what happens as they are eating, Jesus literally, he washes the disciples' feet, which they should have been doing, but they were too busy, remember, arguing about who was going to be number one in the kingdom. They were concerned about numero uno, and so all of them forgot that they should have been washing Jesus' feet, but Jesus wound up washing their feet. And remember that Peter objected to it. Remember that he washed Judas's feet, and yet in the end, Judas betrayed him. But they ate the Passover meal. So let's get to that, because many people that I know just celebrate the Passover meal. There are so many elements that are on the Passover table, the Seder table today, that because of 70 AD and the destruction of all of the records, it's only an oral history that's passed down. The Haggadah is read. Several elements are put on the table. The bitter herbs, which is a reminder of Israel's bitterness in slavery. There's an egg sometimes on the table that nobody knows how that got there. Many believe that it was because the egg actually is a sign of resurrection. There are some that believe that it made it onto the Passover Seder table because there were Jews who had committed their life to Jesus, and I need somebody to remind me to talk about that in a few minutes. That there was sort of this conflating of the two, which is how that egg wound up. But there are a couple of important elements that I want to go back to that Jesus that evening did something different with. He did something that totally changed it. During the Passover Seder, there are 5 cups of wine, depending on how one does it, but pretty much this is the way it's supposed to be done. 4 cups of wine are all drank at different times during the Seder to remember Israel's, and keep out this word, redemption, when God delivered them, when God redeemed them, when God bought them back out of slavery. And so it's a very important picture. So the wine, which represented this redemption. So there was that. Then there was unleavened bread. Today, when Passover is celebrated, there is usually some type of a linen 1 unit bag that has three different matzahs that are placed in them, and the second one is taken out and broken and hidden, and people go look for it later. And depending again how they celebrate it and what they do, either gifts are given. It used to be hidden from the parents, hidden not by the parents for the children. Sometimes the children hid it for the parents. It all depended on how they did it, but that middle, what happened is there was the three, okay, in 1 unit. Second one's taken out, broken, wrapped in a linen cloth, and hidden somewhere, okay. And then when it's found, it's after dinner, it's the celebration, it's that sort of thing. Now there was, by the way, in the Talmud, there was a difference, and I can't remember the rabbi's name. He didn't like that part. He didn't like the celebration part. Basically, after it's over, you should go to bed. But then other rabbis said, no, it's a celebration. So that context, and I know this is some heavy stuff, that context needs to now inform where we go from here. So the night of Passover, Jesus is eating with the disciples. And instead of doing what normally they did with the Passover at that time, Jesus takes the bread, pulls it apart, breaks it, hands it to the disciples, but then he says this is my body that is broken for you. And then he says, do this in remembrance of me. Time out. Wait a minute, you're taking the Passover, and now you're saying that this is no longer about God just delivering Israel, but you're saying this is your body that is broken. Do this in remembrance of me. Okay. He then takes the cup of redemption. We don't know what cup he necessarily took. We don't know. It may have been after dinner. We just there's several cups of wine that were drank, but he took the cup, which remember was a cup of redemption. And here's what he said to the disciples. And this to me is the most powerful connection of all for us in Passover. He said, "This is the new covenant." We use the word testament. The new covenant in my blood that is shed for you. As often as you do it, do this in remembrance of me. So now they're like, whoa, hold on, Jesus. So the bread now is you. The wine now is your redemption of what? Jesus was declaring himself once again to be the Messiah. And he was telling them that what was upcoming for him in just a few hours as this process starts, that this is a whole new ballgame. That it is not a whole new ballgame, but it is a continuation. Everything that Israel had been promised, everything that had been depicted in the feasts, everything that was supposed to that they were supposed to celebrate and look forward to, he was saying, it is here, now, today, with me. And he used the word, what we call covenant. There were so many covenants that God made with Israel. And there was, of course, the Noahic covenant, which he put a bow in the sky, a rainbow, and said, never going to, my covenant is, my part of this is I'm never going to flood the earth again. There's the Abrahamic covenant where he told Abraham, I want you to look up to the stars. And he said, if you look at the number of the stars, that will be the number of your descendants. So there was the Abrahamic covenant. There was the Davidic covenant. The Davidic covenant that he had was even more important, because what he promises that the Messiah was going to come through the throne of David and he would establish the kingdom. But then it was also what he called that he was going to establish a new covenant in which he would write the law not on tablets of stone, but on the heart. That the law would become something that would be inward, and that inside of all of this, that then there was going to be a governing factor that was not going to destroy the law, but was actually going to fulfill it. And so he says, and in that day, when that new covenant comes, I'm going to cast your sins as far as the east is from the west, and I will remember them no more. That was new, that new covenant. Because remember, the Day of Atonement covered over sins every year. New covenant far as east is from the west. That's infinity. I'm not going to remember your sins. So when Jesus grabbed that cup of redemption and he said, this is the new covenant in my blood. This is it. This celebration now takes on an entire new meaning. Now, what was also interesting today is that there is a part in the Seder where while they're celebrating, they will actually go to the door and open the door to figuratively allow in Elijah, because remember, Elijah was going to come. There was going to be a prophet that was going to come before the Messiah. And so I have very dear friends that are Jewish. They may even be listening right now. And I often threatened that I was going to go over and when they open the door and scare everybody and dress up as Elijah and say, yeah, I'm here. Some of them have a great sense of humor, but we joke back and forth about this stuff. But that's an important part, because there was going to be a prophet. And remember, if you remember what we did Sunday, if you didn't see the message Sunday, you can go back and watch it, with the exception of about the 2 minutes it froze. When you go back and you watch that Sunday, you will see that they came to John and said, are you the prophet? Are you Elijah? Are you this? Are you that? And they missed that Elijah was actually not going to be reincarnated, but there was going to be a forerunner that was going to come before. And he goes, no, I'm not Elijah. No, I'm not that. Not who you think I am. But then he was making way for the Messiah. So Passover, back to Passover, with all of that context, why do we not celebrate Passover? Can I say it in a different way? We do. We do. We don't call it Passover. We have changed the name, for whatever reason, to the Lord's Supper, because we are looking back on what Jesus did as the fulfillment of all of this. So, and by the way, I'm going to have to see if somebody can remind me or shoot me an email. There is a Peter Cologne with Friends of Israel. I was just checking on our time. Peter Cologne with Friends of Israel has an entire video on Christ of the Passover, and how actually there's so many of the elements that wound up being on there that Christians and Jews were celebrating this together, and they sort of conflated these things, and for good reason. I could literally celebrate Passover and enjoy it with my friends, knowing the meaning that it has to me. So they were looking forward to a Messiah, and Jesus was celebrating with his disciples. He's the connecting point. He said, I am the Messiah. Now, back to something real quick that did the blood over the door protect the Gentile too? The idea was, yes and no. I mean, obviously, but the Gentiles didn't follow it, because this was about the Jews at that time. The point of what Jesus did, and so let me take it one step further, so I want to answer that there, Bill, is that remember when Jesus came in Matthew 10, the first time he sent his disciples out, he said, listen, you're going to go out, don't go the way of the Gentiles, and don't enter into the city, into any city of the Samaritan, go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Tell them basically the Messiah is here. That's what he told them to do. He did not extend the invitation to everybody else until he died and rose again. And then, even then, the disciples had to be pushed out of Jerusalem and Judea into Samaria, and then to the Gentile world. So the point of it all is when Jesus died on the cross. In Greek, the word is telestai, which means it is paid. The debt is paid. Jesus became the scapegoat. He became the atonement. Remember that blood had to be shed all the way back from the book of Genesis, in order for God to cover over Adam and Eve in the story. Blood had to be shed, and he had to do the covering. And what Jesus said back from Genesis to then is, I'm here. I'm the covering. I'm the atonement. I am the perfect, unblemished sacrifice, not just for all the wrong that you've done, but for the wrong that everybody's done. And I just want you to believe that I am who I say that I am. So Passover is certainly not something for us to criticize. It's not something for us to preach at. It's not any of that. But Passover for us, when we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we don't have all of the other elements on the table. But this should infuse what we do with new meaning, understanding that Jesus took the elements put it together and said, look, I am the sacrifice. Everything that I promised the Israelites, everything that I promised I would do for the world is here, and it's fulfilled in me. Now, there are, of course, there are Jews out there who call themselves, as I may have mentioned earlier, Messianic Jews uh, who who celebrate the feasts, but they celebrate it with Jesus in mind. Um, and so, and there are some, just like there are Christians that are um, that don't like the way other Christians celebrate or do certain things. The same thing happens in Judaism. Remember that in Judaism there are basically four different sects of Judaism. SECT, four different sects of Judaism. They are Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and Reconstructionist. Some view the Messiah still as a person to come. Others view the Messiah as an age that is to come, an age of peace. And so it's interesting, just like we interpret certain things differently. There's Orthodox and Reform and Conservative and all of those kinds of things, and progressives in Christianity. But I think that we have to, if we look at the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament as we do, and have the respect for it, then we have to understand what we're doing today in the light of what they did, not as a criticism, but as an understanding. It undergirds everything that we do. It's real important to understand those things. All right, I'm going to look here. So the thing is that we do celebrate Passover. We just don't do it in the way that they do it. And let me just run through real quick, because I know I'm going to go over for a little bit, but I start a little bit late. Let me just go back. To answer the New Testament. Oh, hello, Marianne. Nice to meet you. A story that refers to Jesus quite a bit. I always wonder, not as it would be. Okay, love to Jewish fact. There are, they are. If once you understand, Elena, once you understand, everybody else that's listening, the elements on the table, and you put everything in its context, it's so meaningful. It's incredible. That's why I joke about saying I would go and be Elijah, but as a joke. But I say that to my friends, that they would open the door and I would be dressed as Elijah. And while that's funny, I have too much respect for what they're doing to actually carry that out, because it's a serious thing that they're doing and what they're looking forward to and what we're looking back to. And so it's really, really important that we understand these things. And so, and I think it's important, especially for us as Christians. I know we want Jews to understand us, but I think it's more important that we understand them, that we understand where we came from, because so many Christians for years just discounted, and it resulted in such anti-Semitism. As I said up front, the nonsense about Jesus being crucified for the Jews, that is just, it's ludicrous, it's ignorant, it is anti-Semitic, it's all of those things, and that's that'll get me angered again, because when I see, by the way, let me take it a step further. There's a lot of discussion today about prejudice and racism and all of the things that go on. Do you know, if you're a Christian, there's one group of people that God said were the apple of his eye, and that was the Israelites, the Jews. That means that if you've ever had anything in the center of your eye, in your pupil, it's the most sensitive part of your body. God says, look, I'm sensitive when it comes to the people that I chose. Now the question is, well, why did he choose them? And I'm going to give you a great theological answer. Are you ready? Because he wanted to. Did they deserve it? No. Do we deserve salvation? No. Nobody deserves it. It's because he wanted to. And I have said for years, and people can argue with me and fight with me on this all that you want to, but I believe that America has often seemingly been blessed and been the place of freedom because of how we have been a friend to the nation of Israel since they were founded as a nation. And so it's really important that we understand these things, and that we understand where we came from. We understand where our faith is at. And while there are some of our Jewish friends, obviously, that are still looking for the Messiah, they're looking forward to him. We're looking back on him. We believe he was found in the person of Jesus, which is why we are celebrating this, especially Passion Week, Good Friday, Easter Sunday. And that, by the way, is going to be a wrap here. Unless you have another question, let me just invite you to our Easter services. We're not doing anything fancy this year. I've been saying we were going to think about doing all this different stuff because we're with meeting, but we've been meeting since May on a limited basis. And so we've been meeting at 9:45 and 11 a.m. And we have two services for your convenience. So you can come. They're about 45 to 50 minutes long. We will be back-to-back services, 9:45. Get that group out, 11. Facial coverings are required right now. We're still practicing physical distancing, although it may be a little more difficult this coming Sunday. We'll see, who decides to come to which service. We're not requiring people saying, okay, we're going to, cut it off of it. We may have to if we get overpacked at 11 o'clock, but we should be okay. We'll also have our online. We'll be streaming online. That's going to continue. It's funny, people have asked me, are we going to, are you going to continue to stream when this is over? Yeah, because I believe the church is everywhere. It's not just in a building. We're a community Bible church that meets right now at one location at 4650 Southwest 30th Avenue in Dania, but we're all over the place. We've got people that are watching from all over the place, and people of different faith. We have people from everywhere that are watching this because we are the church, and we are going to continue to do what we are doing. We'll have these broadcasts on Tuesday. Make sure that if you are here, if you found us, if somebody shared with you, make sure you like our Facebook page. You'll get, whenever we go live, we'll be we will thank you, Bill. Thank you for being here. We will every time we go live, you'll get notification on that. I will also, I don't know whether I can do that right now. You know what I will do? I'll pin a comment in here later on, a subscription link to our YouTube channel. So if you don't know how to subscribe to it, all you'll need to do is click on the link and it'll take you right there and allow you to subscribe to that. And so I have to find that information. But if go over to our YouTube channel, and even when you get the emails from us, make sure that you subscribe when you're there, and there's a little bell, and make sure you get the notifications. Also, if you'd like to receive our text messages, our text message alerts, our email alerts, send me email, and then with your phone number, which gives us permission, then we have a record of that, to info, I-N-F-O, at CBCFL, as in Community Bible Church Florida, info at cbcfl.org. Info at cbcfl.org. Make sure we have your name. We'll have your email address, obviously, if you're emailing us, but make sure we have your name, and you tell us, please add us to the text list, or just please add us to the email list, and you'll get all of those alerts wherever you are, unless it's international, but we will make sure that you are well aware of everything that's going on. So it was a great question that came in, and so I so much appreciate you all watching today. I hope we were able to get some clarity with this on what Passover is and why, as we are moving into Good Friday. And we are closed at the preschool this coming Friday, so spend some time with family and friends. And we would so much appreciate you joining us one way or the other this coming Sunday at Community Bible Church. And if you're going to your own church, great. You want to watch us later. I always tell folks, sometimes I'm just better off. You're better off listening to me in the background. So I do that so much with YouTube. I'll put something on, and then I can't sit and watch it for a long time unless there's an interaction discussion going on. So sometimes I'll hit the button if I'm listening to somebody give a presentation, and I'll walk away and have my my headphones on so I can hear what's going on, or if I may take it on my walk. So anyway, make sure that you do that. We'd love to have you be a part, even if it's a virtual part of our church, because if it's virtual, it doesn't matter. You're still connected to us at Community Bible Church. So with that, everybody I know we've gone like 10 minutes over, but I think it was a good discussion today. And so thank you so much for all that you do, for connecting with us, for being here, and we will see you very soon. God bless.